We are live, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel. And I thank all of you for being here, wherever you may be, and of course, however you may be listening. Well, it is, of course, that time of week. I have had you covered since day one. Every game of the season, we've had you, or I've had you locked and loaded with Iowa Hawkeye football coverage. And this is, of course, the Iowa versus Minnesota game preview. And it's official. The Iowa football season has begun to get very, very interesting very quickly. This is an anomalous type season with very interesting facets all over the place. Well, actually, it's pretty straightforward if you really get down to the nitty gritty. But nonetheless, things are very interesting. And I will discuss a little bit more about Iowa's offense, this historically good defense, which I said before the season started in my preview of the Iowa Hawkeye football team, that this Iowa football team was littered with talent at every level, and it is continuing to play out. This Iowa defense is getting better week by week. And as I said again, this is absolutely a historically good defense. At the very least, this is probably the best defense as of now. The stats that we're seeing, I would say in the past 10 years, probably more, maybe even the entire Kirk Ferentz era, but definitely the past 10 years. But before we get into the Iowa versus Minnesota game preview, be sure to hit that subscribe button. It takes 1.25 seconds. Support your boy. This channel continues to grow. At the very least, like, comment, share. If you want to send a donation, you absolutely can. I am so grateful to all of you who have already done so and supported the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this. All right, kids, as we always do, we will be looking at ESPN's kind of team-by-team comparison. The Football Power Index, the ESPN Football Power Index, which I think has Iowa ranked about 32, 33. I checked it this afternoon. They have moved up 4 spots after last week's shellacking of Wisconsin. Last week's victory over Wisconsin, after I rewatched it, and I didn't get to say this in the post game for Iowa versus Wisconsin, was probably the biggest beatdown, non-beatdown game I've ever seen. I mean, you look at the final score, but then you watch and you look at the final score and you go, wow, man, Iowa must have been, just firing on all cylinders. And then you actually watch the game and you go, maybe that's not the case. And Minnesota obviously is ranked higher, and this game is being played in Minnesota. So the Hawkeyes will be on the road. The Football Power Index gives Minnesota a 68% chance of beating the Hawkeyes. Of course, it has been wrong the past 2 weekends at the very least. They had it wrong versus Wisconsin. The Power Index also had it wrong against Purdue. I always say, when it comes to computer rankings, the human element, isn't there. The ability to recognize when a team is starting to hit their stride, starting to get hot, starting to play with some mojo, some juju, that is not always there. The bottom line is, when it comes to the Football Power Index, or ESPN's Power Index, they rate offenses higher than they rate defenses. And in general, Iowa's defensive ranking and special teams ranking are especially high, but their offensive ranking is quite low. So it is what it is. All right, player by player comparisons here. Spencer Petras, 141. I think here, let me maximize this a little bit. There we go. Now we're getting somewhere. Spencer Petras, 141 of 251, 1,495 yards, 5 TDs to 5 INTs, Tanner Morgan, 103 of 153, 1,324 yards, 7 TDs, and 5 INTs. Is there one quarterback who has fallen more than Tanner Morgan has? Now, the thing, and if I remember correctly, there was a bit of a quarterback controversy brewing for Minnesota as the backup quarterback came in against Nebraska and basically paved the way for a Minnesota Golden Gopher victory over the Huskers. Iowa, I do remember recruiting him. His last name is Kalakanikis or something like that. He also has, I think he has a twin brother. So Iowa was definitely in on him. They didn't get him. Obviously, Minnesota did. We'll take a look at that further. But as of right now, Tanner Morgan has more stats for us to look at, rushing yards. But yeah, going back to Tanner Morgan, is there a quarterback who has fallen further than Tanner? Tanner Morgan at one time was considered a first or a possible 3-round, definitely 1-2 by some places, definitely 1-3 by a lot of places, just 2 years ago. And I don't think anybody even can. I think most people wouldn't even consider him a potential draft pick at all in any of the 7 rounds. Now, make no mistake, nobody expects that from Petrus either. But Petrus, no one has ever over the course of his career thought that he was, a draft eligible quarterback. Anyways, now, honestly, guys, I wouldn't be super surprised if Spencer ended up getting drafted just because of how many games he's won as an Iowa quarterback. But, it's highly unlikely. Rushing yards, Caleb Johnson, 118 for 610 yards, 5 TDs. Iowa has completely gone with him as the starting running back. LaShawn and Gavin have struggled to get healthy. And Caleb Johnson, the reality is, just provides an element that those two guys do not. And it's not that they are necessarily, inferior in all ways. It's just Caleb Johnson does what both of them do well. They're 1 to 2 things they do well. He has that all together. I mean, he's big, he's fast, he has great vision. He's a physical runner. Iowa hasn't had this probably since LaShawn Daniels. He is an excellent freshman running back, and I am so happy Iowa was able to flip him from the Cal Golden Bears. Ibrahim, 238 carries, 1,261 yards, and 18 touchdowns. He is having a phenomenal season this year. Receiving yards, Sam Laporta, 49 receptions, 506 yards, 1 TD. B. Spanford is the leading receiver for Minnesota, 31 receptions, 374 yards, and 2 TDs. Let's go down and look at the market. The betting odds has Minnesota as a 2.5-point favorite. The over and under is 32.5, according to this pick center here. Let's take a look at some of the team stats. I'm going to have to minimize this again so we can get the full view. Points per game, Iowa 17.9 compared to Minnesota's 30.6. Points allowed per game, 13.9 to 13.1. So Minnesota still has an excellent defense. And if I were just looking at these stats here, it's not that 7-3 is a bad record. It's a really solid record for Minnesota. But one would think, honestly, that would be more like a 9-1, 8-2 team, because those are excellent numbers. Putting up 30 and only giving up 13.1. I mean, they're giving up less points than Iowa is. I'm actually kind of shocked about that. Total yards, 251.1 to 403.7, not even close. Yards passing, 152 to 181, or 182, excuse me. Yards rushing, 98 to 221. Yards allowed, 260 to 274. Pass yards allowed, 172 to 167. Rush yards allowed, 88 to 106. So hopefully Iowa can pave some holes on the ground. I mean, if there's one area, and it's not even necessarily that Minnesota's bad at the run game. It's just, of the two, that's probably the area for Iowa to try and exploit here. Now, the last 3 games, I would say, well, yeah, the last 3 games, I was going to say last 5, but definitely the last 3, I would say Iowa has had the tougher schedule. But, I wouldn't say that Rutgers, Nebraska, and Northwestern is necessarily easy. But again, still, I would say Iowa has played the tougher schedule in the last 3 games. Minnesota beat Northwestern 31-3. Iowa beat Northwestern 33-13. They both beat Rutgers by a similar score. Obviously, Minnesota got the come from behind victory over Nebraska. At the time, the thing is, at the time, had I known that Iowa was going to surge ahead, and even though I continuously said Iowa had a shot at still winning the Big Ten West, but it was still unlikely. Had I known that this was going to happen, I would have absolutely rooted for Nebraska to take down the Gophers. But the thing is, I really don't like Nebraska. And so, anytime they lose, again, at the time I was rooting for Minnesota. But man, it really would have helped the Hawks had they lost to Nebraska. But the good news is Iowa controls their destiny more or less. I mean, I would say Iowa controls 90% of their destiny. So that is the good news. They beat Minnesota. It doesn't even matter. So there you have it. I do want to pull up really quickly who the quarterback was versus Northwestern for Minnesota, because I do think that this possibly can be an interesting. Oh, wow. It was Kaliakamanis. I think I got that wrong. Not a great game, but wow. So that's who they are going with. Ibrahim is just a monster. He really is. He went for 178 yards rushing for 3 tubs. Now, obviously, Iowa has a 4 or 5 game win streak over Minnesota. I think it's 5. Could be because at one time they had the same streak over Iowa State, Minnesota, and Nebraska. Obviously, Iowa State snapped that. But anywho, so very interesting. So we'll see. I think I'm gonna pull up the depth chart just to see who Minnesota is as of right now is gonna name their starting quarterback. So this is from our lads. Let's see here. Still has Tanner Morgan listed as the starting quarterback. That is interesting. Maybe he was injured still last week. Very interesting. Well, it is that time. I am pulling up some of the Pro Football Focus grades. I say this in every video. I don't pull up every position, and I don't do it on purpose. I'm not purposely, disguising one position over the other. It's pretty much at random. I just try and pick the main positions. So here we go. Not going to show all of them. If you want to go check all the grades out, you absolutely can. Just go to pff.com. Tanner Morgan. Wow, he's actually graded really high. He's graded as the 13th best quarterback in the country with a 90.9 grade. Wow. I'd be very curious to see what Minnesota fans, because the stats don't necessarily indicate this high of a grade. They really don't. Very interesting. Ethan Kaliakamanis has a higher grade than Spencer Petras. Not really surprising. I said I was going to get into just the interesting facet of this Iowa Hawkeye football team. And it's very simple. Yes, Spencer Petras looked better against Northwestern and Purdue. But and he didn't play a bad game versus Wisconsin. But in general, he basically came back down to earth. Iowa is winning. They have won 6 games basically off of the backs and the shoulders of the defense. The defense is winning in spite of the offense. This is not complimentary football. It's not at this point. yes, Iowa's done a better job of getting out of the way and doing just enough offensively to go, decent, I guess. But make no mistake, it is still all about the defense. And yes, Iowa special teams as well. I mean, they made, you cannot not mention the Iowa special teams. Literally, uh, they got 10 or 14 points off special teams against Wisconsin. Blocked punt. Deontay Craig blocked a punt. And then Cooper DeJean's great kick return. Obviously, Drew Stevens has been just a beautiful get for the Iowa Hawkeyes at kicker. He's a true freshman. But the main point is, folks, Iowa, it is all about this defense, and this is a historic defense taking and willing this Iowa team as far as it can go. And personally, I'm interested to see how far they can go, how far they can take this Iowa team. Here are the wide receiver grades. Not really surprising. The very averageness of all of these receivers. Nico Ragaini is Iowa's highest rated receiver. Again, not very surprising there. We'll take a look at the halfbacks. I really am enjoying Caleb Johnson. I think he has just been tearing it up. He hasn't been perfect by any means. Give him a break. He's a true freshman. So there will be some growing pains, but I think that this will be an excellent game to kind of judge his trajectory as across the field. Mohamed Ibrahim is, going to be a top 5 round NFL draft pick. Mohamed is graded as the 26th best running back. Caleb Johnson is graded as the 93rd. Not bad at all. I will absolutely take that grade all day long. Moving right along to the tight ends. Wow. Minnesota. I very surprised by a few of the grades from Minnesota. Tanner Morgan, one of them. Nick Kellerup is graded as the 3rd best tight end. And if that wasn't enough, they have the 4th best tight end in, according to PFF, with Brevin Spanford, who is their leading receiver. Sam Laporta is 27th. That's a great grade. But it's becoming very obvious that Minnesota's bread and butter is 100% the run game and tight ends, counting on their tight ends to move the chains. And you know what? They have 7 wins off of that recipe. And, in my opinion, I think Iowa should mirror that. They have the talent at tight end to do it. And we've seen it. We've seen Iowa do it before with other offensive coordinators. Hell, even Brian Ferentz has done it in the past. It can be done. In this day and age, with the type of skill set that some of these tight ends possess, you really can do that. And all you need really are 2 really solid tight ends, maybe even 3, to will most of your sets, formations, and 1 slot receiver who can, keep the defense honest with a throw here and there. That really should be Iowa's game plan. Tight end, slot receiver, maybe take 1 deep shot, run the ball, tight end, like that. That is what it should be. Anyways, cornerback grades. Beanie Bishop has a great grade for Minnesota. Riley Moss is the 18th best. Cooper DeJean, who had an excellent game last week, also very highly graded for the Iowa Hawkeyes. All right, guys, the last position I am going to show is the linebackers. Jack Campbell, no surprise here, top 5 linebacker in the country with a grade of a 90.8. Seth Benson having a great year as well. He's absolutely played himself into the draft discussion. I absolutely believe he will get a NFL combine invite. We can see here Logan Klemp, Kyler Fisher, Jay Higgins. Not as high of a grade as I would like, but he's gotten some excellent reps that we needed him to have. Looking forward to next year. All right, guys, it is time Game prediction time. Best part of the show. Listen, folks, the bottom line is for me, and I'm going to make this very simple. I said before the season started that Iowa was the most talented team, top to bottom, in the Big Ten West, and I still feel that way. I said that even a couple of weeks ago when things looked very bleak for the Iowa Hawkeyes. That was part of the reason why it was so frustrating. The reality is, even though this Iowa team is below average, saying that they are average would be vastly overestimating their actual ability. The bottom line is, even with that being the case, if this Iowa defense holds as we've seen them do to Purdue and Wisconsin and Northwestern, holding them to 10, 3, 13 points, it's going to be very hard to beat them. It's going to be very, very difficult to beat them. So, I look at this. Iowa is the more talented team. It's not that Minnesota is a bad team, but I do think Iowa is more talented. I think this Iowa defense is elite, and they are going to be totally up to the task of stopping Ibrahim. Would I be surprised if Muhammad Ibrahim had a great game? Of course not. He is an excellent running back. I would not be surprised in the least. This defense, folks, this Iowa defense, been saying this for a while. Some of these things I've been saying on a consistent basis is solid, elite on all three levels of the football. The defensive line is 10 players deep with guys who can come in and make plays. Lucas Van Ness, Joe Evans, they have guys who can stop the run, who can clog the gap. They have guys that can pressure the quarterback. They have guys who can do both. John Wagner, Noah Shannon, Logan Lee, have done a great job clogging the paint. With Lucas and Joe getting on the outside. You have guys like Van Ness and Lee and who do both well. You have Deontay Craig, who's emerging, Ethan Herkett, high 4-star All-American in high school, Aaron Graves. The linebacker, you have a potentially first, second round linebacker. You potentially have two NFL draft quality linebackers on your defense. Okay. In the back end, you have multiple guys that, again, will be drafted. Riley Moss, Kayvon Merriweather, Cooper DeJean when the time is right. Sebastian Castro might. Quinn Schultz has played himself into the conversation of getting drafted. This defense is loaded, guys. That's the point, okay? This defense is loaded. And I do, we've seen it over the past couple of weeks. If Iowa can do it against Wisconsin, they can do it against Minnesota as well. Not that I believe Wisconsin is vastly superior to Minnesota. In fact, I think they're probably very similar. But the point is, if they can do it against them, they can play a similar type of game against Minnesota. The key in this game is going to be the extracurricular stuff. What big plays can Iowa make? How does Drew Stevens kick the ball on the road in a tough environment against Minnesota? With that being said, although there are some things I do like about this Minnesota team, and they, by the way, my predictions are paving out perfectly. I said Iowa and Minnesota were the two best teams going into this season. Although I do have respect for this year's Minnesota team, and they have been having a good season, I think there's too much at stake for Iowa not to take advantage, and I'm going to pick the Iowa Hawkeyes to win this game 22-16. Another fairly low scoring game. Even though it's a 22-16 pick, I wouldn't be surprised if it was 17-10, 14-7. Any of those possibilities of low scoring scores, I would not be surprised in the least. This is going to be a heck of a game. Iowa controls their destiny, and they better. I hope to gosh, even though, yes, the offense still needs to have some questions answered at the end of the season. They absolutely do. Make no mistake, that is still a thing. Iowa needs to absolutely take a look at Brian Ferentz and whether he's good enough to be offensive coordinator. This is for everything. And Iowa knows what is at stake. And I believe that they are going to be up to the task and make it happen. All right, guys, I am taking the Hawkeyes. As I said, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. It takes 1.25 seconds. If you guys want to donate to the channel, you absolutely can. You can join the other amazing fans who have supported your boy and the content that I create. At the very least, like, comment, share. You know the drill. And last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy willow. In fact, our feelings, because your feelings don't matter. Love you guys, and go Hawks.